Well, speaking of the economy, here's another issue that's really important to Michigan's economy, the impact of tariffs and trade. Daniel, it's yours.
Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning. Daniel Howes from the Detroit News. I'm with Joe Comartin, who's the Consul General of Canada in Detroit, and Brad Williams, who's the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Detroit Regional Chamber. Well, gentlemen, we are here to talk about tariffs, and we are doing this on a minute-by-minute basis. As some people may know, the President threatened to put 5% tariffs on Mexico, on all goods coming in from Mexico, starting in June sometime, and June is like tomorrow. And the markets are down 300 on the Dow. General Motors is down 4%, Ford's down 3%, FCA's down 4%, and a lot of people are wondering where we go next. What are you hearing through your channels, Joe? I'm sure you are getting some reports from your folks as to what this may or may not mean.
Yeah, I don't want to be facetious about this, but I really wanted to spend last night watching the basketball game. But instead I was reading all these briefing notes on what the President has done. Because it's 5%, the proposal is to slap this 5% tariff on, I think it's June the 10th. But then it's an escalating one over the next several months, all the way up to potentially 50% on all of the products coming in, all the cargoes, all the shipments coming in from Mexico into the United States. It's got the potential to completely paralyze the trade between Mexico and the United States. The requirement on the business community side of having to show whether these products, in fact, are subject to this tariff, and the onus is on them to do that, is basically going to paralyze the transport of goods between the two countries.
And they're pumping in about, I think, $1 billion a day from Mexico into the United States in terms of goods, right?
That's right. That's a good figure, yeah. It's accurate.
How do you think the government in Ottawa and in Mexico City will react to this?
I don't have a sense. I haven't had any direction from our government as to what they're going to do. We're not impacted on it directly as a government, but I have to think that Mexico, at this point, at the very least, will suspend any move to ratify the USMCA. You know, they were holding off doing that until the other tariffs were lifted, which happened 10 days ago. And now the President has moved against them again. So I imagine at the very least, USMCA is suspended in Mexico at the present time.
Brad, why do you think the President is taking this action, even as he's got administration officials who've been pressing on Capitol Hill to begin the process towards ratification of the USMCA or NAFTA 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, if I could figure out the motivations of the White House, I'd be a far wealthier man. I think the thing that I find interesting here is, like other trade actions that the President has taken, you see people say, don't panic. The market will go down for a couple days and then it will resume its somewhat steady climb. But what concerns me is that we seem to have these every couple weeks, where we're going to have a couple bad market days because whether it's steel and aluminum tariffs or these most recent Mexican tariffs, at some point we have to have a foreign policy that has some other tool for meeting our goals beyond just slapping the tariffs on and going through several days of market disruption. At some point, we need to find other avenues to address our challenges or our concerns with our friends and neighbors in North America.
So what do these tariffs mean? Both perspectives, I think, are important here. For Michigan and for trade between Canada and the United States, if they continue. I mean, what does this mean for the manufacturers, auto companies, suppliers, other industrial companies that maybe aren't in the value chain, if this continues?
Well, I mean, there's no question that we're living on a planet where the chain is quite clear of how integrated it is. As we have the slowdown at the Mexican border, it impacts manufacturing here in Michigan, Ohio, you know, the Midwest, in the auto sector. There's just no question about that because of the way it's integrated. Parts move in both directions. Finished vehicles move in both directions, primarily out of Mexico into the United States and into Canada. And that is going to get slowed down very, very dramatically.
Can either of you characterize any kind of tone you're getting from manufacturers or picking up from auto companies about this? I mean, it's very difficult to make any kind of long-term investment decisions when you really don't know what your costs are going to be, right?
Yeah, when we talk to our members, certainly there are a number of policy choices that impact their decisions, taxes, regulatory. But the one thing that is going to freeze a manufacturer is uncertainty. And we're now in 2.5 years of complete uncertainty about what our international trade situation is going to be. I mean, that is one of the reasons why getting USMCA across the finish line is so important, so that these companies that are making multi-decade decisions have some certainty as to what our trade relationship is going to be within North America. Unfortunately, this news that we saw last night only makes that less likely to happen. You know, if I'm a member of Congress in Mexico, why am I going to vote to ratify USMCA and give the U.S. a huge trade win when, on the other hand, the president is imposing 5% tariffs on every good that crosses the border? It's kind of beyond reason, I guess.
I think the other thing, Daniel, you have to appreciate it for the auto sector in particular, is that in terms of what's going on right now, I mean, we've got a major shift occurring in the auto sector, moving away from the internal combustion engine to electric cars. And I mean, those are tough decisions for CEOs and the senior people in the boards in those companies. And then now you pile on this uncertainty around tariffs. It just makes their job really, really difficult. I know that there are a lot of decisions that are being suspended. Some CEOs are taking the risk that this is what's going to happen, with no guarantees that, in fact, that's where the economy is going to go because of this kind of uncertainty that tariffs impose.
What always mystifies me about this, the president's approach to tariffs and the markets, is that they can't kind of cancel each other out. I think he is betting on the fact that if he gets a NAFTA 2.0 and is tough with China, which I think has some bipartisan support depending on what the issue is, he'll be okay electorally. On the other hand, he sees the stock market performance as a barometer of his presidency, right?
Yeah.
And you can see when he'll put out a tweet, say, yeah, you know, we're going to kick these things forward 180 days, like he did with the
European.
China, the European. And also the market goes up. And I'm like, okay. So what about the political calculation? He will not be elected president if he doesn't carry the state of Michigan, probably. I heard this week.
I think that's a fair assumption.
I heard this week up here, people think, I talked to, in fact, I think I asked John Kasich behind the scenes, I said, do you think he's going to carry Ohio? He said, absolutely. So, okay, he carries Ohio, but if he doesn't get Michigan or Pennsylvania, so how does this help him in Michigan?
Well, I don't think it does. I think he needs to run for re-election in 2020 with a signature policy goal beyond the tax cuts, because the tax cuts were so long ago people will have forgotten about them. This is his chance to get a signature policy achievement, is getting USMCA across the finish line. It was going to be a difficult fight with the Democratic House of Representatives anyways. This doesn't make it any easier. And so I would, from a political perspective and a policy perspective, but since we're talking about the politics right now, suggest taking a long look at what the ramifications are of these choices.
Do you think in Parliament, before this little Mexico thing in the last 24 hours, were there enough votes to pass USMCA in Parliament?
Oh, the votes were definitely there. It was more a question of whether we could get it done quickly enough in order to deal with our coming federal election. I was very involved in Parliament for a good number of years in the process, part of it in particular as Deputy Speaker. It would be very, very difficult, and I think Canada has to make a decision now as to whether they're going to stand in partnership with Mexico and say, you just can't do that. If you're doing it to Mexico, you're going to do it to us the next time. So I know I assume the Prime Minister and the Cabinet right now is discussing whether, in fact, they're going to spend, because we initiated, Daniel, so we initiated this week. The bill actually went before the Parliament this week, and they've got it on a timeline where they think they can squeeze it through before the end of June, when our Parliament will stop, and then we'll go to the election. So the decision now at the level of the Cabinet and the Prime Minister will be whether we just suspend that process in solidarity with Mexico.